Hello, and welcome to another edition of Get Ready for Game Night, the YouTube series primarily intended for my friends, where I teach them how to play some of my favorite board games so that when we have game night, they can just come over and we can start playing. Tonight, I have decided to teach you guys how to play Cyclades, or some people say it's pronounced Cyclades. One of my favorite games, designed by a great designer, Bruno Cathala, along with Ludovic Moublanc, published by Madagot Games. And one of the other reasons I chose to teach this one is because it doesn't seem like there are a lot of YouTube videos out there explaining how to play this great, highly thematic auction game. So, let's get ready for game night. So, the big idea behind Cyclades is that each player will be taking on the role of a certain faction that resides in the ancient Greek Isles, I think called Cyclades. Um, there is a fantastic bidding action where every turn you will be bidding coins, and again, these coins do not come with the game. These are an aftermarket improvement that I bought. The coins that come with the game are made of cardboard. Throughout the game, you will be bidding on which god's favor you want to incur. And depending on which god you choose or which god's auction you win, that will allow you to do certain amazing things to build up different types of settlements on these various islands. As soon as one player has achieved 2 temples, that's these structures right here, as soon as one player controls 2 of these at the end of their turn, they will be declared the winner. Along the way, you can call on various monsters to help you achieve your goals. You can also wage war with each other. In other words, you don't have to build the temples yourself. You can let someone else build them and you can attack them. I actually think that they're not called temples. I think these are called metropolises. That is correct, yes. So as soon as one player controls 2 metropolises at the end of the round, they are declared the winner. So before we get into the details of the rules of the game, I want to cover a few key concepts that you need to understand to play this game well. First, let's talk about the different ways that you can build or acquire a metropolis. The most basic way is to build one of each of these building types during the game. The orangish red buildings are called fortresses. The bluish buildings are called ports. The white buildings are called temples, and the purple buildings are called universities. As soon as you own one of each of these anywhere on the map, you immediately remove all of them and replace them with a single metropolis. That's one way you can get a metropolis. Another way you can earn a metropolis is with these cards here. These are called philosopher cards. As soon as you own, I believe it's 4 of these, you again immediately turn all 4 of them in and you immediately gain a metropolis. Now, where do these building tiles go? Well, on each island on the board, you can see there are some white square outlines, and on some of the islands, you can see the red dotted outline. Whenever you acquire one of these buildings, it will go on an island that you control inside one of the white squares anywhere on the island. You can put it anywhere you'd like. If you get a second building, it can go any white square you'd like. Now, once you acquire a metropolis, let's say by turning these in, the metropolis must go inside the red outlined square. Now, I mentioned an island that you can control. So let's back out a little bit and talk about what control actually means. If you have any piece of plastic, these are called armies. You also have fleets on the board. In this case, the yellow player controls this entire island and this entire island. Now, islands are considered one space. No matter how big or small the island is, this entire island is one space. This entire island is one space, you get the idea. It is possible to leave your island and go to another island. By abandoning the island, you don't lose control of it. You just put a control marker on it, indicating you still own that island. It's just undefended, and it would be very easy for someone else to take it over. The way you're able to move like that is if you have a continuous line of ships or fleets. So the yellow player was able to, with a movement action that we'll cover later, jump from here to here. If they wanted to go all the way, pan out a little bit, let's say they wanted to get to this island, well, to do that, they would have to have a continuous line of ships. Now, if they called on the right god's favor, they could move all their troops that way. So we covered one way to build a metropolis, and that's build each of the 4 building types. Another way, as I said, is to gain 4 philosopher cards. But then the third way you can control a metropolis, and maybe why this yellow player wanted to move here, is maybe there was already a metropolis there, controlled by another player. If you invade another island and conquer it, you gain the metropolis that's there. But let's say maybe there's not a metropolis there, but there is 2 other buildings. Well, if the yellow player invades there and takes over that island, they gain control of those 2 buildings. If the yellow player already controlled the other 2 building types on an island that they previously controlled, well, as soon as they take over this new island, they now control all 4 building types. All 4 of them immediately are removed, and you replace them with a metropolis. This metropolis can go on any island that the yellow player controls. So it could go here or here. Other big ideas of the game. As I said, it is primarily an auction game. And most of the bidding is going to happen over here on this auction board. When you bid on the gods, you'll be taking your little sacrifice marker and say, here's the goddess Athena. You're going to say how much gold you're willing to bid to gain the favor of Athena. And you might say, I'm going to bid 5. Well, you have to be honest. You're not allowed to bid 5 if you don't have at least 5 gold in your possession. And the amount of money that you have is always secret. So, if we look up a little bit, the game comes with these really nicely illustrated shields, basically, that every player sets one of these up, and behind it is where you keep your stash of money. But the other thing these shields do, which is a really nice game design element, is if you look on the back of all these shields, it outlines for you, if I can get it to go into focus, there we go, the sequence of events on a turn, as well as illustrations that tell you what each of the gods' favor will do, the different ways to get a metropolis. You see here, there's the 4 philosophers, or the 4 different buildings, what the priests do, what each of the buildings do individually, as well as what every monster does in the game. So every player has one of these sitting in front of them, and they're all illustrated differently, which is a really nice touch. And you keep your money behind these boards, and it's also a handy reminder of what you're going to do on your turn. Another key concept, just for completeness, is the game will accommodate anywhere from 2 to 5 players, and the board is different for every player setup. If you zoom in on the lower right corner of both player boards, there's actually 2 player boards that you put together, you will see a certain number of player counts. So you will use this side of this game board for 2, 3, or a 4-player game. And if we swing on over to the other side, you use this side for a 4 or a 5-player game. So in this case, because you see a 4 here, oops, bumping the camera, and a 4 here, that means I have set up a 4-player board. Another concept in the game is something called prosperity markers. Prosperity markers are basically how you're going to get your income. And there's 2 ways you can get a prosperity marker, or 2 ways they're represented in the game. These individual prosperity markers that you can earn and place on the islands you control. And if you look on the game board itself, let's pick one to zoom in, there are prosperity markers on islands permanently printed. So there's a tiny little island, but it has 2 prosperity markers on it. There are also prosperity markers hidden within the waves of the ocean. So I believe they are all on the edges. There's a prosperity marker out on the edge on an ocean space. And prosperity markers, as I said, are the way you're going to get money. There is a phase during every round of the game called the revenue phase, where you will receive 1 gold piece for every prosperity marker that you control. And gold pieces are a fundamental engine that drives this game, because you really can't do anything in this game without paying gold for it. And we'll talk about that in detail once we get into game flow and how the game will progress. So let's talk about the actual game flow now. And we can always refer to our player board on the far left. You'll see step number 1 of every game round is update the mythological creatures deck. Step 2 is update the gods track. Step 3, collect your revenue. Step 4, make your offerings to the gods. And finally, step 5, take all the actions associated with the god that you have gained favor with this round. So we'll talk about those more in detail right now. Over here, I have set up the offerings track. And based on previous turns, this is the turn order, where yellow is player 1, red is 2, black is 3, and blue is 4. Because when you're bidding on the gods, you're not only bidding on the power of each god, you're also bidding on turn order. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So step 1, update the mythological creatures deck. This is the mythological creatures deck here. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, in the last round, 2 of the mythological creatures were purchased, therefore they would be here in the discard pile. So, to update the deck, you take the creature furthest to the left, slide it all the way down, the next creature would fill in here, and the next creature would fill in here. So at the beginning of every round, there's always 3 mythological creatures that you can purchase when it's your turn. We'll talk about them in detail in a little bit. Next, update the gods track. Now, these gods, there are 4 different ones to choose from: Athena, Poseidon, Ares, and Zeus. The way you update this is going to change depending on player count. Not all of them are going to be available every round, except in a 5-player game. So in a 4-player game, one of them is going to be randomly taken out. The other 3 are randomly shuffled and then put back up here. And I believe, I'll double check this later, I believe the next round, whatever god wasn't chosen, automatically goes to the top, and then the remaining are shuffled and 2 more show up here randomly. I'll double check that though. So that's the next step. Update the gods track, then collect your revenue. You look at how many of these prosperity markers you own, both in terms of the tokens and the ones you control out on the board, and you'll collect 1 gold for each one that you control. Everyone starts with 5, and then there's going to be a revenue phase at the very beginning of the game, and trust me on this, based on setup, everyone starts controlling 2 prosperity markers. So before any bidding begins, everyone will start with 7 of these gold coins. Then the offerings will occur, and this is where the meat of the game and the strategy comes into play. In turn order, so up here, the yellow player would get to bid first. They would announce which god, Poseidon, Athena, Ares, or Apollo, well, he's sort of a special case that we'll talk about in a second, which god's favor they want to gain. Each god's favor does a dramatically different thing for the game, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. But right now we're just going to cover how the bidding works. So maybe yellow player with his 7 coins says, I'm willing to spend 2 gold, so you put the offering marker covering up number 2, to gain the offerings of Poseidon, or the favor of Poseidon. Okay, great. Next. Look up here, red player is now going to make his offering. Now, the red player can bid somewhere else, Ares, Athena, or just go to Apollo, or they can outbid yellow. And let's say they bid 3 for Athena, we go to black, and maybe the black player really wants to the favor of Poseidon. So let's show how outbidding works. If you want to outbid, you must place your offering marker at a level higher than the person that's already bid on that god. You can't match them. You have to go higher. So let's say he bid 3. You now do not go on to the blue player. Instead, you stop, and immediately the yellow player takes his offering marker, and he must now bid somewhere else. He is not allowed to rebid on Poseidon even higher. They must bid on Athena or Ares or go to Apollo. They are permitted to outbid red if they so choose, forcing red to now change their bid to a different god. And in theory, they could outbid black, who could outbid yellow, who could then go back to outbid red again. If you are outbid, you immediately change the god you are bidding on. But that's getting a little ridiculous. Let's say the bidding looked more like this. The blue player got their turn. They really want Ares. They outbid red, and eventually someone is going to go and take Apollo. You'll notice there will always be 1 god available for each player in the game, and the offerings phase, where you're making your offerings, will end once everyone has chosen a god. Excuse me. Once everyone has successfully bid, then everyone must pay, take coins from your bank, and put them back into the central bank, if you will, for their chosen gods. You would then rearrange the player order, because this person will go first, then this person, and Apollo kind of doesn't go at all. But there are some compensations made for Apollo. So you would rearrange the player order up here to look like that. So you know how bidding will proceed in the next round. And that's how the offerings phase works in detail. Now let's talk about the actions you can take once you have determined which god's favor you will receive this round. So in turn order, let's start with the yellow player and just look at Poseidon. This information is available on the back of all the player boards, but we're just going to look at the god board itself to figure out what you can do with Poseidon. So first of all, right at the beginning, you get one ship to place for free. So you would look at the state of the board, and you can place a new ship out anywhere around an island that you control. So the yellow player could put a new ship here because it's around an island that he controls. Or here, same idea. Here, 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 because they control this island. And that you get for free whenever you gain the favor of Poseidon. Now, if you really want more than one ship, that's okay. You can add a second ship if you pay 1 more gold, and then you can add a third ship if you pay 2 more gold on top of that one, and a fourth ship if you pay a total of 3, 4, 5, 6 gold. You could accumulate 4 new ships on a single turn. The other option you have when you have Poseidon's favor is you could pay 2 gold to gain a port, one of the buildings that we talked about earlier in the video. So let's say the yellow player wanted to build a port. Okay. He pays his 2 gold to the bank. He grabs a port tile and puts it out in any white square that he controls. The benefit of having the port, in addition to being 1/4 of a metropolis, is that whenever a sea battle takes place in an area surrounding your port, so any sea space that touches the island that has your port, you will get a +1 to battle. We'll cover how battle works in a little bit. You can also move your fleets. And the way fleets move is a little bit intricate, but it's not that hard, and that's what we'll cover right now. So to move fleets, we'll take a look at our Poseidon's God board again. You'll pay $1, and then you can move starting on any space that has any number of your ships or fleets. You can move a total of 3 times. And you can pick up and drop off ships along the way as you make these 3 movements. So let's take a look at the board to get an example of how this would work. I've gained the favor of Poseidon, and I want to move ships. So I pay my 1 gold coin to the bank, and now I can move 3 total spaces. And let's say I want to start here. I could move 1, 2, 3, but I could also pick up along the way and go 1, 2, 3, so that I've got a big fleet of ships in one space. Or if I started this way, I could go 1, 2, 3, and drop ships off along the way. The reason you would want to do something like that is because having a string of ships from one island to another is the way you will be able to move troops on a future turn. And that's pretty much all the options with Poseidon. Now, before we move on to the other gods, let's talk about the mythological creatures. Also on your turn, regardless of which god's favor you have earned, you can purchase a mythological creature. Their cost is printed right here below their images, and as you may recall from updating the mythological creatures track discussion earlier, this creature is going to get less expensive next round if these 2 are bought. So, if you want to buy a mythological creature, you would pay the corresponding amount of money, you would then immediately take the card and discard it, and immediately take the action that that mythological creature grants you. Now, I'm not going to cover what every mythological creature does, because there are so many that that would just take way too long. But the game does come with a very nice summary sheet that outlines in detail what every single one of the creatures does. So let's move on to the next god and what they allow you to do, Athena. So if you gain the power of Athena, here's what happens. This symbol represents the philosopher, this guy here. And as you may recall, having 4 philosophers instantly gets you a metropolis, which is half of the game-winning condition. So as soon as you gain the favor of Athena, you gain a philosopher card. You can also purchase a second philosopher card, optionally, for 4 more coins. You also optionally can build a temple for 2 coins. Now the special power of the temple is, there is no special power. The temple's only purpose is to be 1/4 of a metropolis toward victory. So Athena is basically, her theme is you are buying victory with her, because you can gain philosophers and buy temples. And again, on your turn, you can always buy the mythological creatures and activate them immediately. Next, let's talk about Ares. Ares is the way you're going to fight and gain troops. So, this is the symbol for a troop. As soon as your turn starts, you immediately gain 1 troop for free, or army they might be called, and place it on the board on any island that you control. Then you can purchase more troops. And I should say, with all these gods, you can do these in any order you wish. You don't have to start here, then here, then here, then here. But you have the option to purchase more troops. After the first one, your next troop, if we can get this to focus, there we go. Your next troop costs 2 coins. Your next troop after that costs 3. Your next troop after that costs 4. You can also build a fortress. Again, 2 coins. It's the red building, 1/4 of a metropolis. The bonus of the fortress is that if you're ever in a land battle on an island with your fortress, the fortress will add a +1 to your attack. And then if you want to move troops, this is almost the only way you can move troops in this game to do land battles, is you can pay a coin and then move any number of troops to any island as long as you have a continuous string of ships connecting them. So, if we look at the game board again, let's say there were 2 troops on this island here, and the yellow player had the favor of Ares. He could, or she could, pick up any number of these troops and move them either to this island or to this one, because there's a continuous string of ships connecting all of them. If they go to another island, and let's just say that there were already some blue troops there, a battle would instantly happen. The same holds true if, let's say, you were moving your ships or fleets while you had the favor of Poseidon. If you had moved your ships into the same space as the blue ships, a sea battle would immediately occur. So maybe now is a good time to talk about how battles happen. So let's look at this scenario here. The yellow player has invaded the blue player's island. And I changed it a little bit so that the blue player already has one metropolis as well as a fortress on the island. So here's the way a battle works. Both players will roll one of these die. Now these die are not standard D6. They have faces of 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3. Each player rolls the die. And let's just say the blue rolled a 0 and the yellow rolled a 3. You then add up your die roll plus the total number of troops you have in the battle plus a +1 for each fortress that you control on that island and a +1 for each metropolis you control on the island, because a metropolis offers all the benefits of every individual building. So if the blue player had controlled this island and the yellow player invaded, the yellow player's total strength would be 3, 4, 5, and the blue player's total strength would be 2 plus 0, 3, 4. So the yellow player's is higher. It doesn't matter how badly the yellow player beat the blue player by, whoever has the total strength in that round of battle, the lower loses one troop. Go on. Both sides now have an opportunity to retreat. First, the player that lost that round of battle has the opportunity to retreat. If they don't want to or they can't, the player that won that round of battle has the same opportunity. And if they don't want to or can't, another battle will commence. It will go back and forth like that. Let's say in the next round, the blue player won, so yellow loses a single figure. And then finally, the yellow player wins, conquering the island and claiming all of the spoils. That would be the end of the battle. Now, if the total strength is ever a tie, for instance, the blue has 1, 2, 3 strength, and the yellow, let's just say they rolled a 2 for a total of 3 strength. Well, ties are certainly not friendly. In a tie, both players lose a troop. In this case, everybody died, but the blue player, because they held that island initially and everybody died, would still control that island just with a control marker and no troops. Now, sea battles basically work the exact same way. You roll a die, you add that number to the number of ships in the battle, plus add the modifier of the port if you control it, if the battle takes place immediately around the island with that port, removing one ship at a time until someone is declared the winner. Next, let's talk about the god Zeus. So, Zeus, when you gain his favor, you immediately gain a priest card. Now, I haven't mentioned priest cards yet, but they're located right up here. They just look like a priest. There's no text on them or anything. They just look kind of cool. And once you gain the favor of Zeus, the lighting's a little better down here, you gain a priest card right away, and you can gain a second one if you want to pay 4 gold for it. What do the priest cards do? I'm glad you asked. If you look along the sides of the offering board, you will see that same priest symbol right there. If you own a priest card, for the rest of the game, whenever you bid on a god, let's say you bid 2 on Ares. When you go to pay for Ares, the priest card gives you a 1 coin discount. So if you had, let's say, 4 priest cards and you bid 6 on Ares, you would only have to pay 2 actual coins when you picked up Ares, because each priest card gives you a 1 gold discount when paying for gods. The other thing you can do with the power of Zeus is you can pay 2 coins to build a, maybe this is the temple and Athena is the library. I honestly don't remember. I think that's right. Zeus is the temple and Athena is the university. I've been saying it wrong this whole time. Basically a purple building. You get the idea. The purple building, the temple, in addition to being 1/4 of building a metropolis, also gives you a discount on purchasing the mythological creatures. And you can see that signaled right there. So for the rest of the game, for every temple, the purple building of Zeus, and for every metropolis that you control, because they have the powers of all the buildings, when you want to purchase a mythological creature, so let's say you wanted to purchase the Kraken here, and you already had a temple, well, you would only pay 3 gold for the privilege of using the Kraken. So Zeus is all about making things cheaper. One more thing that Zeus can do. If you don't like the mythological creatures that are available to you, you can, for 1 coin, eliminate a mythological creature and bring a new creature out to replace it. Now, the way that works is you pay the coin, you would then discard the available creature card and replace it. So let's say you don't like the fact that Pan is right here. You pay a coin, it's gone. You bring out the Cyclops to replace it. You could then buy that Cyclops for whatever your discounted rate is, if you have a discount at all. So that's the other power of Zeus. Finally, someone is not going to get one of the shuffled gods each round. Someone is going to end up gaining the favor of Apollo each round. In addition to going last, going to Apollo just gains you a coin, because usually you're only going to Apollo because you can't afford to outbid the other players for the other gods. So as compensation, you immediately get 1 coin, unless you only control 1 island on the board. If you only control 1 island on the board, you gain 4 coins instead. Also, when it finally comes to be your turn, if you are the only player to go to Apollo, actually, if you're the first player to go to Apollo, you gain one of these prosperity markers to put on any island that you control. So now, for the rest of the game during revenue phase, you will gain 1 extra coin. Now I say if you're the first player to go to Apollo, you gain that prosperity marker, because you will notice there are other spaces here. The game could reach a state where everybody's poor, and maybe you just want to go to Apollo. And maybe more than one person wants to go to Apollo because they're flat broke. Well, then, in theory, everyone could go to Apollo. Everyone just gets a coin, but only the first player that went there gains the prosperity marker. Once everyone has taken all of their actions, you would then check to see if anyone has won the game, by controlling 2 metropolises. If not, you would then go back up to the top of updating the creatures, updating the gods by shuffling these in some way, depending on the player count. Everyone gain their revenue, start bidding again, and start taking actions in turn order again. There's a few more rules that are a little fiddly. For instance, there is a rule that says you cannot take over another player's last island. So if someone's sort of about to be eliminated, you can't attack their last island that they control unless you can prove that by doing so, you will win the game this round. So there's no player elimination. Also, some of the gods, the creatures, 5 of them in fact, have little associated miniatures with them because they have an effect on the state of the board. And these creatures that you see here, they don't come painted. I painted them myself. But like the Kraken and the Cyclops and the Medusa, I forget what the other 2 are called. But when you gain those creatures' favors, you physically pick up these miniatures and put them on the board somewhere, and they have an effect. And again, I'll let you look up exactly what they do. It goes around and around like that. You will find as you play the strategy of how much to spend and when, and how much money you think your opponent has, but maybe they don't. It really is fun, is highly thematic. One of my all-time favorites. I don't play it enough. Hopefully, watching this video has inspired you to seek the game out. Maybe give it a try. One of my favorites, Cyclades.